What secrets hide in the Vatican, and what isn't the Church telling us? Today I'll be investigating a Bible written by the devil, the surviving blood of the Nephilim, and a mysterious angel, the Devil's Bible. There is a Bible so unholy that it contains one of the most shocking images of the devil seen in any medieval book. Rumor has it that the Vatican is the only organization that truly knows the depths of evil contained within the Devil's Bible. A lot of what is known about the Devil's Bible today comes from legend. As far as the story goes, it was a Benedictine monk living in a monastery who wrote the book after he was sentenced to die. The monk broke his vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. This was a horrific sentence imposed on only the most treacherous people. The victim would be put into a room with no door and no windows and just left inside to slowly wither away. Imagine being locked in a basement with no food or water, not so much as a peanut butter sandwich. To avoid this most miserable punishment, the monk promised to write the most beautiful Bible anyone had ever seen in a single night. Not only a Bible, but a book of infinite wisdom containing all knowledge known to humanity. Hearing the offer, the abbot who sentenced the monk to die could not refuse. If someone was offering you a book of infinite knowledge, you'd be a little curious. The monk sat down and tried to write a book of knowledge, but quickly realized it wasn't going to happen, not without a little outside assistance. Who better to assist with the impossible than the master of lies? The monk reached out to the devil. He traded his eternal soul for the devil to complete his great book in an instant. The devil finished the manuscript in the blink of an eye, adding an enormous image of himself on one of the pages, kind of like a signature. How much of the legend is true, I can't say for certain. The Devil's Bible is a mystery that contains both the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's two Bibles for the price of one. Its real title is Codex Gigas, which in Latin means giant book. Scientific tests have shown it was likely written in the 13th century. The manuscript is so big and so immaculately crafted that scientists think it would have taken 5 years of work to complete. Not 5 years as in working for 8 hours a day, 5 years as in working 43,800 hours straight. The most likely scenario is that it took a lifetime to complete the Devil's Bible. It contains the complete Bible, a partial copy of the Vulgate, a pair of works from an ancient Jewish historian, instructions on exorcisms, the medical knowledge of Constantine the African, a random calendar, and a variety of unusual alchemical sketches. One of the strangest parts is that 10 pages are missing from this most amazing of books. Supposedly the pages were destroyed during a fire in 1697. But what if those 10 pages were removed on purpose because they contain something shocking? One theory is that the missing pages are part of the Devil's Prayer, which corresponds to the picture of the devil in the book. They were intentionally removed, perhaps by members of the Vatican, because the prayer can be used for getting in touch with the devil, the Nephilim blood. The rarest blood type in the world is rhesus negative. Only about 15% of the global population has this type of blood. It was identified in the late 1930s and has remained a baffling biological mystery since. The reason rhesus negative blood is so interesting is that scientists don't know where it comes from. One theory is that people with rhesus negative blood are the descendants of the Nephilim. How would you feel if it turned out you were the descendant of an abomination born through the union of fallen angels and the daughters of Adam? It might be a little strange at first, but it could make for a good conversation starter in the lineup at the supermarket, or maybe on a blind date. Before 1937, there were only 4 different types of blood people could have: A, B, AB, and O. But when scientists identified an antigen present on the surface of red blood cells, that number doubled. They realized each red blood cell had a rhesus factor characterized as either Rh positive or Rh negative. For most people, they have Rh positive blood. I already mentioned that 15% of people have Rh negative blood, but that's not the entire story. This is where things get weird and where scientists start to lose track of what makes sense. The number is 15% for Caucasians. However, only 8% of black people have Rh negative blood, and only 1% of Asians have it. To explain this, scientists typically bring up the blue eye phenomenon. As you may already know, most people have brown eyes. But 10,000 years ago, everyone had brown eyes. Then a genetic mutation happened, likely in a single person. This led to the emergence of blue and green eyes. All these years later, an estimated 8% of the global population has blue eyes. Wait a minute, is this a science lecture, or are you here to learn about shocking secrets of the Vatican? The point of all this science is to say nobody knows where rhesus negative blood comes from, nor why such a small number of people have it. But there are suggestions. One potential answer is that Rh negative blood is a mutation like blue eyes. Another potential answer is that the blood comes from the descendants of a unique species. It is plausible that Rh negative blood came into the human genome during an unusual encounter thousands of years ago. Maybe humans bred with reptilian monsters. Maybe they bred with aliens. Maybe Homo sapiens mixed with fallen angels, just like it says in the Bible. Scientists already know that humans mated with other species of early humans, like Neanderthals and Denisovans. I don't want to speak for our whole species, but we do have a long history of playing fast and loose. It could be the Rh negative blood is all we have left of the Nephilim, and the Vatican knows it. Do you know your blood type? Look to the angel. You may have heard the rumors that the Vatican has a real angel chained up in their basement. I'm picturing an angel stuck in a well, a couple weird priests, and a basket of lotion. Somewhere in the secret archives is an angelic creature with wings, bound in chains, kept as undeniable proof that angels exist. Maybe it's true and maybe it isn't. I've never seen the angel with my own two eyes, so I can't give you my first-hand account. All I can say is that conspiracy theories believe the Vatican caught an angel like a leprechaun, and now they won't let it go. There is another angel in the Vatican, this one 100% real and made of stone. The angel statue was recently involved with the world's most baffling disappearance and the Vatican's inescapable shame. Emanuela Orlandi was only 15 years old when she left her music class and disappeared into thin air. The day was June 22nd, 1983. Emanuela left her music school near the Piazza Navona in Rome, bound for Vatican City, where she lived with her father. Her father was a prominent Vatican employee. Emanuela was last seen at roughly 7:30 p.m. waiting at the bus stop. She should have gotten on the bus, gotten off near her home, and been there within minutes, but she never made it onto that bus. It's assumed she was kidnapped, but by who? It has been over 40 years with no definitive conclusions. As you may know already, there have been a ton of developments and even more theories. I would need a couple of hours to get into the nitty-gritty of each update and each scandal. One of the major theories is that Emanuela was abducted by a member of the Vatican police, a man who was responsible for recruiting young girls to secret parties within the Vatican. When I say secret parties, imagine the worst thing that ever happened on Epstein's Island, only on Vatican grounds. Other theories involve organized crime, the KGB, the Vatican Bank, a serial killer, and a botched kidnapping. In 2018, the Orlandi family's lawyer received an anonymous letter claiming that if Emanuela was to be found, graves would need to be dug up inside the Teutonic Cemetery. The mysterious letter included a picture of an angel statue saying, "Search where the angel looks." The angel was looking at the tombs of a pair of princesses. On July 11, 2019, both tombs were dug up. To the shock of everyone involved, the graves were empty. The diggers didn't find Emanuela's bones, but the bones that were supposed to be there were gone as well. Princess Sophie and Duchess Charlotte Frederica were gone. Then things took a turn nobody had expected. Underneath the empty tombs was a chamber encased in reinforced concrete. It was clearly built recently and had once contained something. But in 2019, it was empty. Somebody had removed the bones of the princess and the duchess, then constructed a secret chamber like a psychopath building a murder chamber in their basement. But between the tip-off in 2018 and the exhumations, whoever had built the secret chamber was given enough time to remove any potentially damning evidence. The case is still unfolding as you watch this video. Early in 2023, screenshots were leaked of a WhatsApp conversation between a pair of cardinals very near to Pope Francis. The cardinals were discussing an unspecified object that was moved prior to the exhumation of the tombs in the Teutonic Cemetery. The unspecified object was placed in a different crypt to avoid being found. This was a huge break in the case, especially since the Orlandi family refused to reveal the identities of the cardinals. The cardinals must have been important people and potentially dangerous for the family not to press the issue. It's still unclear what was in that hidden chamber or what happened to Emanuela Orlandi. All I know for certain is that but something in the Vatican stinks like murder. And now for number 9, but first it's shout-out time. I wanted to give a big thank you to @my2sats260 and BjornDamWrong3289 for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Doctrine of Discovery. One of the worst things to ever come from the Vatican, other than pure white papal robes, was a 15th century doctrine. Over 500 years ago, popes in the Vatican began releasing edicts known as papal bulls. These were sort of like laws. You can think of them as amendments to the Catholic Constitution. They did unimaginable damage. It began in earnest in 1452. Pope Nicholas V issued papal bull Dum Diversus. It was a decree which allowed King Alfonso V of Portugal to subjugate anyone seen as an enemy of Christ. Anyone who was pagan within Portuguese territory could be reduced to perpetual servitude. That's what the document actually says. Perpetual servitude as in eternal slavery. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Pagans could have their belongings stolen, their land taken away, and be forcefully converted to Christianity. In 1455, a new papal bull was issued by Pope Nicholas. It extended Portugal's authority to unexplored lands. The edict issued by the Vatican gave Portugal permission, legally binding permission, mind you, to conquer the lands of all infidels in the name of Christ. These papal bulls continued to be created through the 16th century. Spain and Portugal used the Vatican as the ultimate authority to justify conquering, enslaving, and all the horrible things that happened in the New World. For the first time in over 500 years, the Vatican formally denounced the Doctrine of Discovery. The edicts used to legitimize the seizure of indigenous land have been formally retracted. It happened after a group of Inuit, Métis, and other First Nations representatives traveled to Rome to meet with Pope Francis himself in 2023. Do you think it's too little too late? Or is this an honest first step by the Vatican to make up for the atrocities of the Age of Discovery? The Secret of Mary. Leonardo da Vinci may have been privy to more biblical secrets than anybody knows. In 2003, Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code struck a chord with people around the globe. The book, a work of fiction, claims that Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ were more than just friends. Potentially, they were friends with benefits, big benefits. The idea delighted readers and intrigued historians. But what if the Church has known about Mary and Jesus' secret relationship for the last 2,000 years? In the Last Supper, the figure sitting on Jesus' right-hand side is the Apostle John. That is what the Church would have you believe. The truth might be a lot more interesting. Leonardo may have discreetly painted Mary Magdalene sitting next to Jesus Christ instead of John. Just look at the painting. Really scrutinize it. Everybody at that table is clearly a man and one of Jesus' 12 disciples, except for the person sitting to his right. All the other figures in the painting are masculine, some are bearded, and they all look a little bit dirty. You'd look a little dirty too if you lived in 1st century Jerusalem. But the person on Jesus' right looks suspiciously like Mary Magdalene. There's nothing masculine about the figure. Experts in Renaissance artwork don't typically agree with this point of view. They say in previous paintings of the Last Supper, John was also painted with a more feminine flair. It was typical for painters to depict John as a little bit dainty, but then how do they explain the Gospel of Mary? The Bible is a patchwork of stories that have been carefully picked from an astounding number of Gospels that were written near the start of Christianity. The stories that the Church liked made it into the final version of the Bible, such as the Gospels of Matthew and John and Luke. But the Gospels the Church didn't like never made it into the abridged version of the Bible, including the Gospel as written by Mary, Jesus' lover. In the 1800s, an ancient collection of books that never made it into the Bible was discovered in Egypt, somewhere near Akhmim. They were purchased by German scholar Dr. Karl Reinhardt and taken to Berlin for study in 1896. It turned out this was the most important group of lost Gospels that has ever been found. They were published in 1955, much to the displeasure of the Vatican. The collection includes a number of exciting Gospels, including testimonies that totally changed the meaning of Christianity. But it's the Gospel of Mary that stands out as the most exciting. It's one of my favorites, simply for the fact that it backs up the supposed fiction from the Da Vinci Code. The Gospel of Mary includes Mary as one of Jesus' disciples and most likely his girlfriend. Many scholars believe it to be evidence that the Church has been wrongfully excluding women from their organization, even though Jesus himself had a female apostle, the Serpent Seed. There's an unusual branch of Christianity that most people have no idea even exists. These people still consider themselves Christians. The difference is that they follow a train of thought that even the most extreme groups call crazy. They are followers of the doctrine of the Serpent Seed. Believers of the Serpent Seed have a unique take on the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. They claim that Eve didn't eat the apple to get kicked out. She mated with the serpent, bearing Satan's child. The son that she bore with Satan was Cain, while the son that she bore with Adam was Abel. This would make the story of Cain and Abel a little more relatable, since they weren't full siblings and were only half-brothers. That's not too weird, right? Don't worry, it's going to get weirder. Followers of the Serpent Seed believe Eve's promiscuity by cheating on her human partner with a giant talking snake resulted in the creation of two different races of human. There were the descendants of the serpent, cursed to be damned for all eternity. Then there were the descendants of Adam, blessed from the beginning to gain eternal life. As the years went by, the two different races of people intermingled and mixed. Now there are 8.1 billion people on this planet, and the followers of the Serpent Seed believe half of them are descendants of Satan himself. Does that mesh with what you know of human beings in general? This unusual religious belief gained a lot of traction in the first 100 years after Christ died, but then it started to disappear. It didn't really come back until the 19th century, during an explosion of American religious divergence. The Serpent Seed became a way to promote white supremacy in America. The myth of the Serpent Seed lasted 2,000 years, just to be promoted by the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party. Alien civilizations. The Vatican knows that alien civilizations exist, and so does the US government. According to a set of recently leaked emails, the Vatican is hiding an unimaginable truth. The truth is that aliens are out there, and that a war is coming soon. If you thought being drafted to a war in a foreign land would suck, wait until the aliens show up and you have to fight extraterrestrial lizard people in your backyard. The email was sent by astronaut Edgar Mitchell to John Podesta, an American politician. Inside the email, Edgar claimed that the Vatican is well aware of extraterrestrials. Edgar said the aliens are benevolent and want to share their technology with humanity. Unfortunately for everyone interested in getting a free hover car and learning how to teleport, humans are apparently too unruly. The offer of unlimited technology will instead result in all-out war. It's easy to laugh this type of thing off as silly or foolish. Why on earth would an astronaut be emailing a politician about alien technology and the Vatican? It does seem like something that belongs in a movie, not in our reality. But these are real leaked emails sent between two very real people in positions of power. At the time the emails were exchanged, John Podesta was serving as the advisor to President Barack Obama. Later on, he would become the head of Hillary Clinton's campaign when she ran for president. This is a guy who has had the ears of the most powerful members of American society. Edgar Mitchell is someone who you might honestly listen to if he told you aliens are out there. He used to be a NASA astronaut and has physically been to space. Have you been to space? If someone who has left the planet says extraterrestrial intelligence is working directly with God, you might listen, even if you don't wholly believe them. In the leaked email, Edgar briefly mentioned catching up on extraterrestrial intelligence that is being kept by the Vatican. This seems to imply that the Vatican is the holder of all alien secrets. It also implies that top members of world governments must be well informed of alien activity by the Church. The conspiracy theorists may have been wrong this whole time. Area 51 isn't the hub of alien activity. The real Area 51 is the Vatican in Rome. Weird Catholic hairdos. There is something even more diabolical than the Vatican's hidden knowledge of aliens. It's even stranger than the Serpent Seed doctrine. Dare I say it's even more frightening than the Devil's Bible. I'm talking about a bizarre haircut that has been rocked by Roman Catholic priests through the centuries. The haircut is known as the tonsure. Take a look at these wacky pictures and tell me it isn't the worst hairdo you have ever seen in your life. It's worse than a backwards mohawk. It's worse than the greasiest mullet to ever be greased. Members of the Vatican used to wear this haircut as a badge of honor. They shaved all the hair on their head, except for a thin ring of hair around their scalp, just above the forehead and behind the ears. The tonsure looks ridiculous today, but it held great significance to monks and priests during the Roman Empire. The first maniac to take a razor to their head and leave only a thin strip of hair can be traced to the 4th century AD. This was right around the time Rome fell to its enemies. The haircut was likely meant as a symbol of a priest or monk's dedication to Jesus Christ. 1600 years ago, followers of Christ were a lot more invested in his original message than many followers today. It's easy to forget in the stress of everyday modern life that Jesus Christ was all about casting aside the vanity of the world and embracing humility. To be frank, Christ's teachings were strikingly similar to teachings in Buddhism, Hinduism, and Sikhism. Jesus was all about shedding immaterial things and living a modest existence. The tonsure haircut reflected this. It was a symbol of somebody's willingness to cast off the greed of the world and live simply. To understand just how close early Christianity was with religions in Asia, you need look no further than this truly awful haircut. It was worn by Roman Catholic priests and Buddhists and Hindus. Part of the inspiration may have also been the crown of thorns worn by Jesus Christ during the crucifixion. Monks adopted the hairstyle not only to prove their humility, it was also a way of emulating the suffering of Christ as they pledged to live lives of self-denial and obedience. What are your thoughts on the tonsure? Do you think with enough effort we can bring the style back? Maybe after a few TikTok videos, everyone will be rocking the tonsure instead of the broccoli, the Basilides. If there is one thing the Vatican does not want you to know, it's that Christianity almost didn't exist in a form that it's in now. In the early part of the 2nd century, there were many religious leaders who taught their own views on Christianity. If any of these leaders had gathered the same clout as Jesus just a few years earlier, they could have changed society. One of the more obscure leaders you may not have heard of was Basilides. He lived in Alexandria, Egypt. He was also the founder of the Basilidians, Gnostics who were obsessed with spirituality and the origins of the universe. Imagine if there was at least one major religion today that put its focus on universal mysteries instead of gods. Basilides lived during the rule of Emperor Hadrian, supreme leader of Rome from 117 until 138 AD. He was likely friends with another famous Gnostic teacher, Valentinus. While people were still trying to understand what the message Jesus Christ had given the world was, Basilides traveled to Rome and started preaching his own message. He became surprisingly popular, soon starting a whole movement. It kind of sounds like Basilides was a cult leader, and in a way he was. But so were the other religious leaders who showed up and started trying to sway the people of Rome into thinking like them. Basilides taught his followers that God was so powerful that he wasn't even really a being. God was a force of unimaginable power named Abraxas. Basilides also taught that the God of the Bible, the one that was supposedly Jesus' father and the creator in Jewish law, was beneath Abraxas. God, the one worshipped today, was sort of like an underling. His boss was the almighty Abraxas, creator of all that ever was and ever will be. You would get laughed straight out of church for preaching this message today, yet the message was widely popular at the start of the 2nd century. Do you remember the collection of gospel texts I talked about earlier, the gospels found in Egypt that includes the one about Mary Magdalene being a disciple? In that same collection of texts are other Gnostic works suggesting Jesus was not what the Vatican says he is. Basilides taught that Jesus is indeed the Savior, only he didn't come to earth to die on the cross for the sins of humanity. Instead, he came to teach spiritual knowledge that would uplift humans from their depressed states. In other words, Jesus came to cheer folks up and bless their spirits, which he hoped would help human beings understand their place in the universe. The Ark and the Pyramid. Where did the Ark of the Covenant go? And what was even in it? According to one theory, the Holy Ark was an advanced piece of technology used as a battery to power the Great Pyramid of Giza thousands of years ago. And yes, you can bet the Vatican knows all about it. They may even have the Ark hidden in their archives, maybe right next to the bones of Emanuela or Landi. Everyone knows about the Ark of the Covenant because of Indiana Jones. But what does the Bible specifically say about this great artifact? In the book of Exodus, God summoned Moses to the top of a mountain and gave him 2 stone tablets. Upon the tablets were carved the 10 Commandments, laws by which humans must live if they are to abide by God's rules. But what do you do with giant stone tablets when you're at the top of a mountain? I imagine they would have been a little heavy for Moses to carry around with him. Not to worry. God thought of everything. He provided Moses with instructions on how to build the Ark of the Covenant to keep his new stone tablets in. God said wherever the Ark went, he would be present. Naturally, the holy reliquary was plated with gold. It wouldn't be a Christian relic if it didn't have at least a little bit of gold. Gold rings were attached to each corner, then ring staves were placed through them to make the Ark easier to carry. Before it was sealed forever, a pot of manna was placed inside. Manna was the mysterious substance used to feed the Israelites for 40 years as they wandered the desert. Plus, Moses' brother Aaron placed his magic staff inside the ark too. The ark was allegedly taken from Jerusalem by the Babylonians during an invasion in 597 BC. What happened to it next is unknown. Researcher David Wilcock believes the ark wound up in Egypt, where it was placed inside a secret chamber within the Pyramid of Giza. The ark filled the pyramid with energy, which was concentrated at a giant metal sphere at the top of the pyramid. The giant metal sphere is now lost, as is the ark. Some think the artifacts were captured by the Romans and stored within the Vatican. All the pieces of advanced technology were stripped from all Egyptian pyramids and either stored somewhere or destroyed. You might be wondering what proof there is to back up these incredible theories. There are indeed hidden chambers within the pyramid that serve no obvious purpose. These could have been used for multiple ark-like objects that created immense energy. What that energy was used for, I couldn't possibly say. Some suggest telecommunication or perhaps a weapon. Maybe when Moses was talking to God, he was really talking to aliens using advanced technology, and he was at the top of a mountain so he could get a better signal. Edgardo Mara. If the Vatican did kidnap Emanuela Orlandi, it wouldn't be the first time they abducted a child. Edgardo Mara was a young Jewish boy kidnapped by the Vatican in the middle of the 19th century. His story is beyond even the strangest things you've heard today. Edgardo was born in 1851 to a family of Jewish merchants in Bologna. Shortly after he was born, he grew dangerously ill. The family had a Catholic servant by the name of Anna Morisi. She was concerned for the young boy's salvation and secretly baptized him without his family's knowledge. This was a classic moral dilemma. The servant shouldn't have gone against the family's wishes, yet she was doing what she thought was right in her soul. It turned out to be quite the predicament for the family. When Anna admitted to the church that she had baptized the child, they decided he was officially Catholic. A group of the Pope's personal police arrived at the family's home in June 1858. The police informed the parents that Edgardo had secretly been baptized and was now a Catholic child. It was illegal for a Catholic child to be raised by Jewish parents, so the police forcibly took Edgardo and brought him to the Vatican. For a really weird reason that's never been explained, the child was personally taken under the wing of Pope Pius IX. Maybe it was inappropriate, maybe it was a Michael Jackson situation, or maybe the Pope just really liked the kid. When Edgardo grew up, he became a priest. The Kingdom of Italy captured the Vatican in 1870, obliterating the Papal States. Edgardo, still a teenager, fled to France instead of going back to his family. He spent the rest of his life as a priest and died in Belgium at the age of 88. The alien ship. Today, you have learned that the US government works closely with the Vatican to safeguard the truth of extraterrestrial beings. But before I go, I want to give you one more piece of evidence that potentially proves it's true. Ex-Pentagon employee David Grush claims the Vatican helped the United States of America retrieve a crashed alien ship. The alien ship was originally picked up by Italian dictator Benito Mussolini near the end of World War II. David has been making waves in the last few years. He has been saying that the United States possesses alien technology and that they have already dissected alien bodies. Big whoop, right? People have been saying that forever. However, David's been taken more seriously than other whistleblowers because he did in fact serve in the Air Force for 14 years. He's a decorated veteran who's worked with the National Reconnaissance Office and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He had access to secrets as normal people only learn about on YouTube. David said the first known UFO recovery took place in the city of Magenta, Italy. It was 1933, and most people didn't even know what a flying saucer was. The object was collected by Italian fascists. The Vatican soon learned of the mysterious wreckage. Then, near the end of the war, the decision was made by Pope Pius XII to alert the Americans. When the fascist Italian regime imploded, the Americans brought the UFO back home with them.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Missing books of the Bible. In the year 1684, the Vatican removed 14 books from the Bible. To this day, there is no explanation as to why, and the Vatican is happier with the general population not knowing. There were originally 80 books in the Bible when it was translated from Latin to English back in 1611. These days there are only 66. The missing books are known as the Apocrypha, which in Greek means hidden. The missing books include Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, the Songs of the Three Holy Children, Bel and the Dragon, Maccabees, and the Prayer for Manasseh. Even stranger is that Jesus' name was spelled Iesus before these 14 books were removed. The church changed the pronunciation and spelling. If they had never changed anything, you'd pronounce Jesus' name as Yahushua. Why were these mysterious books removed? There are many theories. Some say the contents of the books didn't fit in with the Roman Catholic Church's narrative, and so they were simply taken out. Some believe they made the Bible too long and too confusing, so they were removed. But there is no real answer. None of the books were particularly nefarious, and they don't seem to include any secrets. But for whatever reason, the Catholic Church chose to remove them from the Bible so that the Word of God was exactly what they wanted it to be: alien influences. Russian professor Genrikh Ludwig allegedly gained access to the secret Vatican archives in the 1920s and came upon some extremely disturbing information. Before I keep going, keep in mind that this has never been 100% confirmed. The story has been circulating for nearly a century, but we don't actually have the evidence that Ludwig was inside the secret archives. The story goes that Ludwig was allowed into the archives, where he discovered over 53 miles, 85 kilometers of shelving and 35,000 volumes of catalogues. There were documents from over 12 centuries of European history. While he was browsing through the seemingly endless corridors of ancient texts, he started finding things that didn't make sense. There were papers that discussed how aliens had influenced all the most ancient civilizations of the world, from the Egyptians to the Mayans. He also allegedly found historical records of nuclear-style weapons being used in ancient times. One text explained how the walls of Babylon were melted by a weapon that output monstrous temperatures. The professor was never able to leave the Vatican with these documents, so conveniently for his story, no one except him has ever actually seen them. Still, it's interesting that the information about aliens visiting ancient societies and helping them to progress does fit with the known evolution of society. In the 4th millennium BC, the Sumerians went from a bunch of primitive hunters to building walls, laying down irrigation canals, and coming up with a writing system. It could very well be that the aliens helped them, and that the Vatican has known about it all this time. Then again, Professor Ludwig may have just been generating a hoax. The Antichrist. In 2010, Reverend Gabriel Amorth was 85 years old. He was also the chief exorcist in the Vatican, with a history of treating over 70,000 cases of demonic possession. He had a small office on the 3rd floor of Vatican City, where he operated as a very real exorcist for 25 years. In an interview with the Italian newspaper La Repubblica, the Reverend defended his work and freely admitted that he believes the devil is a pure and invincible spirit of evil. He also told the reporters that the devil can speak many languages, he can transform himself at will, and he can stay hidden when necessary. The very fact that the Vatican has sanctioned over 70,000 exorcisms is pretty shocking, but perhaps even more shocking is that when the Reverend discussed an attack by the devil in 1981, Gabriel Amorth claimed the devil infiltrated the Vatican and tried to directly attack John Paul II. And then in 2008, the devil got back into the Vatican again and possessed a Swiss-Italian woman named Susanna Maiolo. On Christmas Eve, she attempted to push down Pope Benedict XVI, but was foiled by the Pontifical Swiss Guard. She went back the next year on Christmas Eve during midnight mass and knocked the Pope over. It's very likely that Susanna was just suffering from some kind of mental illness. But according to the Reverend, she was a servant of the devil. The Reverend passed on in 2016, leaving behind a rather bizarre legacy of demonic paranoia in the Vatican. What do you think? Was the woman genuinely possessed? The Three Secrets of Fatima. The Vatican may look like a simple religious organization from the outside, but they are a lot more mystical than people realize. They have their prophecies and their secrets, most of which they would prefer outsiders to not know about. The biggest prophecy of all was delivered on May 13, 1917. 3 young Portuguese shepherds were visited by an apparition of the Virgin Mary. They were visited 6 times between May and October. Throughout these visits, the Virgin Mary gave the children 3 prophetic secrets. These secrets were apocalyptic visions of the end of the world. After hearing about how the Vatican believes they're under constant attack by the devil, it should come as no surprise that they take these secret prophecies very seriously. Lucia Santos became the speaker for the 3 shepherd girls. In 1941, she finally revealed to the Vatican 2 of the secret prophecies. They were written down and taken away. In 1943, the Bishop of Leiria asked to reveal the 3rd secret, but Lucia refused. She said she didn't think God was ready for her to unveil the secret just yet. But later that year, the bishop had enough and ordered that Lucia write it down. She did, but sealed it in an envelope with directions not to open it until the year 1960. The first secret was revealed by Lucia in her memoir to be a vision of hell. It's pretty graphic and pretty terrible, and we don't need to go into it here. The second secret had to do with World War I and World War II. She predicted World War I would end, but that another war would quickly follow, should men continue to offend God. And in that, she was right. The third secret is hugely controversial. She gave a vivid description of the persecution of Christians in the 20th and 21st century, along with a vision of the apocalypse. But there are many who believe the Vatican did not publish what Lucia wrote, instead keeping her secret to themselves and making up something to satisfy the public. UFO over Vatican City. In 2007, a mysterious orange disk was spotted hovering over the Vatican. Witnesses saw what can only be described as a silver-orange glowing saucer in broad daylight hovering over the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. It was photographed, many different people saw it, and then all mention of it was gone. As quickly as it caught the attention of citizens around the globe, the UFO visiting the Vatican was out of everyone's memory. But that doesn't change the fact that it happened. Something strange and seemingly alien hovered above the Vatican for several minutes in 2007. The mystery is trying to figure out what it was and what it wanted. If we consider for a moment that this really was an alien ship, and it really was just lurking above the Vatican, we have to assume they knew each other already. It could be that the Vatican has indeed known about extraterrestrials for centuries. The ship may have been dropping off a dignitary to meet with the Pope. For all we know, the Pope himself could be an alien. But of course, this is all just speculation. There was something strange in the sky that day, but nobody has any possible way of knowing if it truly did come from outer space. Do you really think the Vatican is in contact with extraterrestrial beings? Let me know your theories in the comments, no matter how crazy they are. And don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. The Lost Gospel. There is allegedly written evidence that Jesus Christ married Mary Magdalene and had babies. The evidence comes in the form of a manuscript from the 6th century when it was translated from Greek to the ancient language of Syriac. The manuscript allegedly tells the story of Jesus Christ as an adult, which is never discussed in the Bible. We see his birth and his death, but not the 30 years between. The manuscript tells a story of Jesus Christ as a sexual person who fell in love with Mary Magdalene and had some babies. This is obviously controversial for a whole lot of reasons. Firstly, the manuscript is unreliable. It is a real piece of work that was sitting in the British Library, but nobody really knows where it came from or exactly when it was written. Also, the manuscript paints Mary Magdalene as the daughter of God and the co-redeemer of humanity. In other words, she was just as important to the story as Jesus. But this obviously wouldn't have sat right with the Vatican, who wanted to whitewash Jesus and turn Christians into prudes. Many historians believe Jesus may have lived a much more human lifestyle than the Vatican wants you to think, profiting from hypocrisy. The Vatican prospers frequently from things they don't believe in. They have a long history of wealth, massive assets, and financial power and influence, despite being a religious entity. As an example, you probably didn't know that the Vatican invested millions of euros in getting the film Rocketman produced. This seems like a conflict of interest, considering Rocketman was a film about Elton John finding happiness in his marriage to his husband, David, a relationship extremely frowned upon by the church. But even though that's what the movie was about, the Vatican had no problem investing roughly $1 million in getting it made so that they could get a piece of the pie. But it's a bit more complicated than that. The Secretariat of State is always investing money. In this case, they invested tens of millions in the Centurion Global Fund. This fund went on to back several films in Hollywood. Those investors kicked back money to the Vatican. The Vatican probably didn't know exactly what they were investing in, but they didn't mind taking the money. The Dead Man's Trail. In the year 897, Pope Stephen VI went through a lot of trouble to put a dead man on trial. It was one of the most bizarre things the Vatican ever did, at least that we know about. The remains of the former pope were put on trial by his successor. Pope Formosus had already been dead for a few months and had no real way of defending himself or his honor. Nonetheless, he was disinterred, put in robes, and then stuck on the papal throne to be handed justice. A deacon was even appointed to speak on behalf of the corpse. What followed will seem like insanity. Pope Stephen VI accused the former pope in front of an audience and hurled words at him as though he were screaming at a real, living person. The dead pope was, at the end of the farcical trial, found guilty of usurping the papacy. In other words, he stole the throne of the pope. Stephen VI then had all his acts, while officially the pope labeled null and void. Everything Pope Formosus had done was undone. 3 of his fingers were cut off, and his body was cast into the river. Shortly after, Pope Stephen VI was thrown in prison and then strangled to death. The whole point is that being the Pope wasn't the best job in the medieval days. They were normally complete lunatics. It was more political than religious, and most of them died young. The successor to Stephen VI was Romanus. He lasted 92 days before being killed. His successor was Theodore II, and he didn't last more than 2 weeks. Who knew that the papacy was so rife with high-octane drama and violence? The Secret Archives. There is no place on this planet more secret than the Vatican's secret archives. There are countless rumors and conspiracy theories surrounding what they're hiding down there, inside what has been described as an underground fortress. But we just don't know. Everything in the archives is so secretive that the Vatican only allows entry to the most trusted scholars over the age of 75. This is undoubtedly so that even if the scholars wanted to spill the beans, they'd come down with dementia before they ever could. And while some say there are alien bodies in the archives and wild things like time machines, none of that is probably true. The truth is that the archives are full of correspondence relating to the Pope. They also hold treasure from the Catholic Church. And because this is the Catholic Church we're dealing with, they obviously don't want everyone gawking at their treasures. We do know of some artifacts being held in the archives. There's a letter from Mary, Queen of Scots, before she was killed in 1587. There are documents relating to the excommunication of Martin Luther. The transcripts from the trial against the Knights Templar are housed here. Anything important relating to the church over the past 1200 years can be found in the archives. But a lot of this stuff is sensitive material, and so the church is never going to let the public get a hold of it. Even if they appear to open the archives to anyone interested, it'll probably be a half-truth. The real secrets will be stashed away in an even more secure archive somewhere out of our reach. The highest crime rate. There's one thing about Vatican City that they don't advertise to the tourists. They have one of the highest crime rates in the entire world. Statistics show that in Vatican City, 1 to 1.5 crimes are committed each year per person. Does that mean you're going to get robbed and murdered on a visit to the city? Probably not. Vatican City has one of the world's highest crime rates per capita, and in truth, this isn't a big surprise, considering they're the smallest country in the world in size and population. There are about 1,000 people living here, mostly nuns and priests, but it's not them committing the crimes. There are 18 million tourists who travel each year to Vatican City. Many of these tourists are criminals. When you stack the pickpockets and shoplifters up against the actual citizens of Vatican City, the crime rate goes way up. Yes, Vatican City has the worst crime rate in Europe. However, it's only because, along with being a hub for religious pilgrims, it's also paradise for petty criminals who want to steal your wallet. What do you think is the Vatican's biggest secret? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit subscribe to help support the channel. See you again soon for another awesome video. Bye.